Hello and welcome to today's web seminar, Lean Ohio, Transforming State Government One Process at a Time, brought to you by Guidon Performance Solutions and the State of Ohio. I'm Melissa Sopwith from Guidon, and I'll be your moderator today. We have just a few announcements before we begin. There will be a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. You can participate in the Q&A session by asking questions at any time during the presentation. Just type your question into the Ask a Question text area in the bottom corner of your screen and click the Submit button. We will collect questions throughout the presentation, and our presenter will attempt to answer as many as possible. You can also enlarge the slide window at any time by clicking on the Enlarge Slide button located below the presentation window. The slides will advance automatically throughout the event. And if you experience any problems with the program, please press the F5 button on your keyboard or close your window and relaunch the presentation using the other media player. You can also visit the webcast help guide by clicking on the Help button below the slide window. Leading today's discussion will be Steve Wall. Steve is the Director of Continuous Improvement for Ohio State Government. He was appointed by 4 governors in 2 states to direct their statewide continuous improvement efforts, which resulted in over $400 million in savings. Steve has served governors from both parties and has twice been a cabinet official. He has also testified before subcommittees of the U.S. House of Representatives, the U.S. Senate, and the U.S. Secretary of Labor's office as an expert witness on continuous improvement in government. And he was an applicant, examiner, judge, member of the Board of Trustees, and officer for the Ohio Partnership for Excellence, which is the state's Malcolm Baldrige Quality Award program. Steve, I will pass the presentation over to you.
Great. Thanks, Melissa. I appreciate it. I am really looking forward to being a part of this presentation, and I want to thank Guidon for setting it up and welcoming me. I've got about 32 years in government experience, and I know that if you're in the outside the public sector, you're probably rolling your eyes a little bit and wondering if quality government is an oxymoron. And if you're within government, you may be wondering just a little bit if these manufacturing kind of ideas really apply. And so I'm looking forward today to spending some time talking about how they really do seem to work. So I want to begin with a little bit of background and in the beginning about how in Ohio we started moving forward on our journey. And then as you can see, I want to establish some results, because those really are the most important things about Lean and getting it implemented. And then share with you a little of the lessons learned that we had, including both what to do and what not to do, and then talk a little bit about what our next steps are and where we would like to go. If you are from state government, this is probably going to look really familiar, but let me talk a little bit about the background of Ohio and where we found ourselves a couple years ago, beginning with no money. Absolutely a horrible time to begin any kind of new program, and yet the perfect time to begin a program that is all about saving money. We in government have many, many processes that have been around a long, long time. No blame, nobody's fault. There's just a lot of processes there. In Ohio, we were really fortunate to have a good partnership with our union regarding the need for continuous improvement. While we disagreed in many different areas, the union was completely supportive of efforts to make our processes simpler and faster because, they truly believe that with good processes, we can compete with anybody. In the past, and I think most states are like this wasn't our first rodeo with quality kinds of stuff. We'd had a lot of successes with Deming stuff. The days when we were debating whether we had customers or not were decades ago, but we still had a lot to learn. And finally, and most importantly, there was a strong desire by the administration and by the workforce to make government services simpler, faster, better, and less costly for everybody. So how did we get started? Well, we knew by the books that we were supposed to start with planning, that we should do some strategic planning, identify our core business processes, perhaps do some value stream mapping to focus, but that's not what we did. We looked for where there was the most pain going on and where we had the most complaints and where there was the most frustration. We thought we'd start there. And in trying to get people to move forward, we wanted folks to have a lot of confidence that this was going to work. But since it was our first attempt at Lean, really what we were looking for was someone who had the courage to try to make it happen. And the sort of hurdles we had when trying to explain what we were going to do with the Kaizen event was a full week? You know, we're really busy. Can we do it in a whole week? Number two, you're bringing in outsiders. You know, we've got to solve these problems. And third, when you do a Kaizen event, you start implementing this right away. And that is a scary, scary thing for senior managers to realize that you're not just going to come up with recommendations for folks. You are actually going to be implementing a new process and a new way of doing business. But fortunately, we did have some people that worked out that way. And in fact, our pain came from a group of folks from the Ohio Manufacturers Association. And the Ohio Manufacturers Association told us that their members' biggest frustration had to do with the Bureau of Workers' Compensation and their process for assigning rates for compensation insurance. Now, every employer has to have workers' compensation insurance, and there are hundreds of different rates that you can have that the federal people have set up. And it depends on the safety of the job. If you're in a clerical position, your rates will be lower. If you're, for instance, a roofer, your rate will be higher. But if you have an accident and you report that your clerical person fell off the roof, then they engage in some kind of debate about whether or not the rate was appropriate. And employers can appeal those rates any time, and by statute, there has to be a 60-day time period from when they request a hearing to when the hearing is granted. Unfortunately, our data showed that it was taking us 142 days to even grant that hearing, and an additional 27 days to inform the employer of the decision after the hearing was conducted. So they waited about 169 days, and that wasn't acceptable to them, and that wasn't acceptable to us. So that was our first target as we tried to move forward. And let me begin by saying the people involved in this were not lazy. They wanted to get things done. They'd made a lot of different efforts to try to move forward. There were attorneys involved, smart people working on this whole thing. There's a little bit of skepticism that if they had already tried and failed, how would this weak process make things happen? But it was pretty interesting. And you can see on the slide one of the first things we do is do the as-is state in a business process map using butcher block paper and Post-it notes. And each Post-it note, as you're familiar with this, has a different definition, and you work real hard identifying what the as-is state is. And when we were done, the perspective doesn't really translate well, but this is the whole wall of a conference room. We had 87 steps, 37 handouts, 20 decision points, and 12 delays, and a lot of laughter that they couldn't believe all the different steps and back and forth that they had to do. But we had our first process map, and we began to look for value-added activity and non-value-added activity. And that's really the thing that Lean does on top of the old quality stuff that makes a difference. You focus in on the waste, what's non-value-added, and you start working on speed. You can see here, in the end, the new process that we had, and we were down to only 27 steps, 10 handoffs, 7 decision points, and 2 delays. And let me put them together there for you. And I guess the perspective has been changed, but you can see that there were quite a few fewer steps involved in the before and the after. And here's what we're really interested in as the results. And you can see that they were able, just in the process, to reduce by 60, 70, 80% the number of delays and steps and handoffs. And in the end, were able to make the kind of reductions they really wanted to in terms of how long these cases started. And what's interesting is we did this first one in May of 2008, and today it is still working. They have not missed the statutory guidelines since then. They created new customer-focused process to resolve claims ahead of time. Instead of having ideas come to all kinds of different places, there was one source of entry. They figured out some ways to do things accurately and timely. We are always having trouble with data, it seems like, in state government. We didn't have enough. One of the side benefits is that they now have a whole system for their performance metrics and rely on data to see how they're moving forward. And this is kind of funny, but they had a history of whenever we try to make a new form within government, that is a bureaucracy when it's within itself. Sometimes it takes up to 2 months just to change a form to get it officially approved. And during the Thursday of the Kaizen event, they created, got reviewed, and got approved a form in 4 hours, and they were stunned at how much could get done during one of these events. And it's really nice to see that it's a sustained effort. It wasn't something